Hello and welcome to Alta Live. My name is Beth Spotswood. I am Alta's digital editor, and I am delighted to welcome you to today's conversation on the ongoing drama that is happening behind the scenes at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I'm joined today by Marcus Crowder. Marcus is an Alta contributor who wrote about the drama at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival for Alta's newsletter. A bit about him before we dive into our conversation. Marcus is an arts writer based in Northern California. For a whopping 17 years, he was the theater critic at the Sacramento Bee, which is where he wrote about jazz, pop, dance, and, of course, at the time, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. His reviews and interviews include Sting, Radiohead, the Rolling Stones, Cheetah Rivera, Greta Gerwig. He has appeared in Alta, American Theater, Diablo Magazine, Sacktown, The Chronicle, and 7 by 7. He is a fantastic and regular contributor to Alta, and we are delighted to have him here today. Welcome, Marcus.
Thank you, Beth. That was one of the greatest introductions I've ever had. I'm glad you're recording it so I can just play it back for myself, from time to time.
Oh, we're in a rush. I could have gone on. Before we dive in with Marcus, a quick sales pitch for Alta Journal. If you are new to us or a longtime fan but have yet to join as a member, please consider doing so. You can join Alta as a member for $50 a year. That gets you 4 gorgeous issues, like our current one right here, our guide to the bookstores of California and the West, and a baseball cap, a California Book Club baseball cap. We also have a number of free events: weekly Alta Live every Wednesday at 12:30, the monthly California Book Club. In fact, next week, we'll do kind of a look at the work of Gary Snyder, including an interview with Gary Snyder and a fabulous panel of guests, and our website. So please do consider joining us as a member. Visit altaonline.com to check out the array of membership and shopping options that we have. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to ask questions of our guest, Marcus. There's also a chat. We love when people let us know where they're zooming in from and get kind of a sense of our Alta Live community. So please do let us know in the chat where you're zooming in from. This interview will be recorded and posted to altaonline.com later today. We're also going to email you a link to this interview, a link to Marcus's article in Alta, and anything else that pops up in our conversation today. So with that, hi, LA. It's nice to see you. Hi, Lisa. I am in Novato, California. Marcus, my friend and colleague, where are you today?
I'm in Sacramento, my home in Sacramento, California. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have to tell you, your article on the Shakespeare Festival was nostalgic for me. My 8th grade class, so that's 1992. We all drove with parents carpooling us up to Oregon from the Bay Area. And that's my one and only experience at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. But I think for so many of us on the West Coast, it is a theater destination. It's certainly quite famous.
And
Can you?
yeah, well, what you did with your class happens still, and it happens regularly, and it's a big part of what they do up there. And when I went up to report the story, and I most recently went up this spring to see the new season, but I was struck by and ultimately really just super happy to see all the young people there who were so enthusiastically taking in Shakespeare and other things, because they were also playing Rent, and the young people seemed to like Rent as well, but they also really loved and responded to Shakespeare. And it's exciting to see that take place, to see the young people brought there by teachers and parents, and that is a big part of what goes on at this festival. And the festival, I know not everybody knows that much about it, and I'm just going to just explain a little bit, what we're talking about, which is it's a 5-hour drive from Sacramento, and essentially a 5.5-hour drive from the Bay Area, where you are up Highway 5 to Ashland, and you go up through the mountains past lovely Lake Shasta, down the mountains, and suddenly you're right there in the Rogue Valley, and there's Ashland. And this Oregon Shakespeare Festival was started in 1935 and has grown and grown since to become one of the largest, most important performance theater performance producers in the country, and it's because of so many great actors that they have, and the 3 performance spaces that they have. And so that, yes, they do Shakespeare. Like this season they have 10 plays and there'll be 5 or Shakespeare, but they do modern, as I said, that they were doing Rent last year. They're doing any number of not Shakespeare plays, but modern plays. And of course, they do Shakespeare, but they'll do Shakespeare in a modern way. They'll do it in a classical way, classical being Elizabethan. And like any festival, people get into it, and they get into it in a way which is part of the drama of it, is that there is an ownership there by the people who are the long time constituents and audience, and because they love it so much and they have spent so much time in it. You mentioned one of the people I've interviewed is the great actress and director Greta Gerwig, and she told me, she told me that it was a tradition in her family since she was a young woman to go up there, to go to the festival. Her parents would take her since she was in 6th grade, and it was something that she loved and forward to. And happily, she said they would often read your reviews and then decide what we were going to see based on what you wrote. And I thought that's really sweet. That's really, but yeah, and in the story, I talk about the director Tim Bond, sitting with some women who were telling him it was a tradition started in their family by their father, who had passed away, but they were continuing on the tradition, and it is a very, very family friendly event, but it's also for theater people. It is the epitome of what we want.
You
So
being a theater person, yes. All right, so I want to get into a little bit of, there have been a big part of your article in Alta was the kind of changes and evolution that has been happening in this company. And it's interesting on so many components. It's an 89-year-old, theater company. It was impacted by shifts in administration and artistic direction. Then there's COVID, there is a racial reckoning to be dealt with, all in 2020 and beyond. And so there's been a lot of changes behind the scenes and a lot of drama behind the scenes at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, the organization. Can you tell us kind of where that started and what's going on?
yeah, about that, it's a lot to unpack, and a lot of it is specific to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, but it's also happening across the country in performing arts organizations. So they have the same challenges that many organizations have. We have an aging audience. That means not just the audience who attends, but the audience and the people who are the donors. They are getting older, and there is a great question of how do we attract a younger audience. And anybody who's producing anything wants to know, how do I get a younger, different audience? Yes, of course. How do I diversify my audience? I was reading a story today about wine industry, and people were saying, we have to innovate our industry. So theater companies across the country started, and it started happening with COVID. COVID made everyone really aware of it, but audiences were getting older. They were not attending as much. Younger people did not have the tradition that I was just mentioning as much. And as we know, there are many more distractions and or attractions for people to decide, where am I going to spend my money? Do I want to spend my money going to the Shakespeare Festival, or do I want to spend my money going to a Taylor Swift concert? And these are legitimate questions that people decide, and need to decide what to do with their disposable income, if they have disposable
Right.
income. But so there was the issue of the aging audience, for one. Then you have COVID. So let me backtrack for just a moment. the festival generates most of its money from ticket sales. So when it's doing well, when they're selling a lot of tickets, the festival's doing well. When they're selling less, of course, not so good. COVID, of course, not there. There's no tickets being sold because there are no performances, and coming back from that is hard. They also have the issues that we all out in the West Coast have had, but they've had in the Northeast too, of wildfires. They have an outdoor theater. It's a huge part of the season, or the 3 plays that are done outdoors. And those have been severely impacted by smoke from wildfires. Again, they've had to cancel performances. You cancel performances, you lose money. So there was that. And then there was just the natural change. And so the artistic director who had been in place left prior to 2020, 2019, Bill Rausch, and a highly accomplished and really revered woman named Nataki Garrett was hired to come in. So Nataki had, and she, when I interviewed her, and I was lucky enough to get her to talk, and she has been sort of reticent to speak publicly about the challenges she had, because there were many. But one of the things she told me was, I was told, we need to reach a new audience. And one of the things she wanted to do, and she says she tried to do, is to market to a different audience than had been traditionally marketed to. She said the problem with that was, once she started marketing to a different audience, the traditional audience felt like they had been abandoned, because they were, as if the festival was speaking to other, because the festival was courting other people, they no longer wanted them, which was of course not the case. But that was how she seemed to think a lot of people felt that. So that was part of, part of her charge, to get this new audience in. But how do you do that? And that, again, that's the question everybody is asking, is how do we find and cultivate this new audience, and not lose, and nobody wants to lose audience that they have. So it's a very thin tightrope.
It certainly is. Well, and especially with an organization that's so old, that has such a loyal people who feel ownership of it. Why was her tenure at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival so controversial? In your article, you mentioned she was harassed. She had to get security. I mean, she was a major donor rescinded a multi-million-dollar donation when she was appointed to her role. What was so controversial?
Well, I think there is just the natural idea that people are resistant to change. And I remember when the artistic director before her, Bill Rausch, came in, and he was following another fairly successful artistic director, and he started adjusting things, and he started changing how the administration worked, and some of the art as well. And at first I thought to myself, oh no, you don't need to change it. This is fine. It's working great. But I realized, as he was making the changes and I was experiencing them, this is how organizations grow. There have to be changes. There have to be systemic changes. There have to be foundational changes for the organization to grow, or if they don't grow, they atrophy. And I think part of what, so, and just as I was resistant at first to Bill Rausch's changes, and then I realized, oh, things are different, but that's not a bad thing. So I think there was some of that for Nataki, but there was also, and it cannot be ignored, there was also a racial component to it. And as Nataki said to me, and it was a very prescient comment that she made, is she said, as I interviewed around the country with organizations, and told them, there is something that will happen with your donors and your board when they understand that a Black woman is at the center and at the head of their organization, and that Black woman's vision is what they are going to have to donate to and support. There are going to be people who don't want to do it. It is just going to be hard for them, because because of that. And I know you think about, can that really be true? And the sad answer is yes it can, yeah, and yes it is, and yes it was. And how much that factors into it, it's very hard to say, but it would just be naive to say that that was not a factor, because it absolutely was, and I think is. So that was a part of it, where you have a very smart Black woman telling you you need to make some changes here, and people were just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that.
And among the changes that she wanted to make, or I mean, really, your article makes it clear that in terms of her artistic kind of direction that she wanted, it was not that different from the previous director, but her kind of selections, the artistic direction that she wanted to take, was looked at by some people as too woke. Could you talk a little bit about how she changed it? What kind of changes were they feeling resistance to?
Well, it's a tricky thing, because I think clearly she was centering a Black experience, if you will, in a number of productions, and that is not such a new thing for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, as they had been bringing in people of color for a long time, and diversifying their casts in that way, with a diversity of actors, for a long time. But I think, you know, she had a number of plays that were all Black casts, a number of plays that were, dealt with Black themes, and I think there, that, along with the other challenges that were happening, kind of became conflated in people's minds, and so it started to be as like, oh, audiences aren't coming because the shows are too Black, which, audiences already weren't coming before the shows were Black.
Right.
That was already documented, that those issues were taking place. So, but I just think it was, and Nataki wanted to do the things that she wanted to do. So we have seen, again, I'm going to bring in other elements of performing arts, because while it's specific to Oregon Shakespeare Festival, it's happening in certain ways across the arts. We've seen it in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Symphony, very similar. It is a very similar situation, where artistic director came in right before COVID, was brought in to do very specific things, as Nataki was, and then suddenly the board says, well, we'd like you to do some different things than we said at the beginning, because we need to bring in more people. So could you change up your programming? And Nataki, just like Esapeka Solonen, said, I'm not going. That's not what you brought me in for, and that's not what I came here for. I came here to do something, and I'm going to do it. I think there was some butting of heads, and again, the racial aspect of it, and perhaps the feminine aspect, the fact that this is a woman telling people, there's a new sheriff in town, and it was hard for people to take.
No, there's an intersectionality there that is doubly difficult, I'm sure, for her. So and I'm just curious, you didn't touch on this in your article, Marcus. How she was really harassed? I mean, to the point where she was concerned for her safety?
She was. I think she had verbal threats. I think threatening letters. Ultimately, she had they hired private security for her around town, because she was harassed verbally by people, and this was the sort of awkward, ugly part of the story, and a bit of Ashland, is that Ashland has this history of racial animosity or oppression from the time that it was founded, and Native Americans were forcibly removed from almost exactly the spots where the theater is now, and taken out in their and settlers moved in, and there were laws on the books where people were able to homestead. white males White males were able to come, and they did, to get land in this area, and start to farm and whatnot. But there, Ashland was then sort of known as a sundown town. And for people that don't know what that means is, if you're a person of colors and don't be here when the sun goes, when the sun goes down, you need to be out of this town. Otherwise, things could happen. And Ashland has had that history as well. And a young actress, uh, for I forget when it happened to Christina Clark, that she was verbally harassed. She was verbally harassed by someone who basically, threatened her, said, I could, I could hurt you, and the law would support me. That was not true. What he said was not true, but the threat was real.
And terrifying.
Yeah, and
So Nataki has quit.
yes, yes, she resigned last year. She lives in Northern California, so I mean, she is from Oakland, but and she is a incredible artist and visionary, I would say, in terms of arts administration. And the ideas that she had are going to be implemented. That they just will. And so what the festival did is, as they hired, luckily for them, there was a very incredible artistic director who had formerly been there, by the name of Tim Bond, who they hired, and he was working at Theater Works down in Silicon Valley, but he had been an artistic director at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, had left. And even though, and people love to say this, is even though Tim Bond left and went out to Syracuse and worked for a long time, he never sold his house in Ashland. So he always had his house in Ashland. So it was one of the funny things when I was coming back, and people were very enthusiastic about Tim, as they should be. Everybody kept saying, he never sold his house. We always knew he was coming back. We always knew he was coming back. And Tim is an African American artistic director who, he's very different personality wise, than Nataki, but he's progressive, he's smart, he's intelligent, he's empathetic, and as people said, they're what the festival needs right now. And people have fallen in. The donors have come back. It seems as though audiences are coming back, and what they're trying to do, and have implemented, is are plays. They're doing a number of one-person plays, which are very it's a financially prudent way to go. And those I saw a couple when I was there this spring. They were both extremely popular. I think that's going to be a successful strategy for them moving forward. But they're also doing, they're going to be doing Jane Eyre and The Outside,
Read that in your article. I was like, ooh, that sounds fun.
yeah.
Love
And
Jane Eyre.
yeah, so we'll see. Again, it's going to be a very diverse cast. It'll be a very diverse cast. So it'll be curious to see how, people react to that when those people hit the stage.
I want to dive into some questions from our audience, if that's okay with you, Marcus.
Yeah.
Martha asks, I'm curious if, regarding the withdrawal of support and donations, endowments from the traditional crowd, which the new director warned of when she was hired, was there a new influx of support from a community that actually was grateful to the changes? Or was it a one-sided loss with no new support?
I think it was mostly a one-sided loss with not as much support. And I don't know that she had the time to generate those relationships and really to sort of show, here's what my full vision is, here's what I am trying to do here. But the short answer would be that I don't think there were donations coming in to supplement what was lost. I don't, because those are based on relationships among other things, and I just don't think those had the time to form for her to get that sort of support.
James asks, and I want to handle this delicately. It seems that OSF is suffering the same phenomenon as public radio, recently exposed as overly politically correct and losing audience because of bias. I in no way agree with this. Could this wokeness be affecting the OSF audience support as well? Could, blaming the Ashland's racial history and prevailing attitudes towards wokeness won't solve the current problem? What concrete steps are they taking? It sounds to me, and James, forgive me if I've reworked this question a little bit. Is there, in response to any sort of backlash to wokeness, is the new artistic director planning on taking any steps to reevaluate balance around that? Again, this is a tightrope that we're walking here, but.
Well, I'd say, first of all, again, you go back to what the audience loss, it's happening across the board in many places. So you could say, gee, Oregon Shakespeare Festival diversified its cast too much. But what about the Mark Taper Forum? They were having problems. What about Brooklyn Academy of Music? They were having problems as well. It is a problem that exists across the industry, and it's because more than what I think is sort of fictional idea of wokeness. Because when people said to me, well, and a good friend of mine is, yeah, it was too woke. I was like, I don't even know what that means. You're gonna have to explain yourself. What does too woke mean? Because it sounds to me like you're saying it was too black, but I don't. And as another friend of mine said to me, just because something was woke doesn't mean it's black. But across the board, the problems are the problems with the audience leaving is not so much having to do with wokeness, although certainly it does have to do with whether they are engaged with the material or not. And we know that Latino audiences like to see themselves represented on stage. African American audiences like to see them represented on stage. Chinese Americans like to see themselves represented on stage. And when they are there, they will, when those productions are telling their story as much as they were telling other universal stories, they will certainly go and attend. So I don't think that I don't feel like that is the problem. Again, it was much more the idea of there's a lot more out there for people to spend their money on, and for where they want to go and do and seek entertainment or intellectual stimulation or both from the theater. It was. And one other thing that I want to bring up about this idea in terms, and it was mentioned to me by a veteran actor and he appears in the story. His name is Tyrone Wilson. He's been at the festival for 35 years. And Tyrone said, often said, nobody likes every show in a season. He says, and in fact, oftentimes there's 3 or 4 plays nobody ever wants to see again, and we are even like, why are we even doing this play? But there are also going to be 4 or 5 that people love, and that's the point of having a season. That's the point of having 10 or 11 plays, is that we're doing a number of different things and allowing people to pick and choose certain things, and there are to be certain things that people want to see and there are going to be other things that only a smaller group of people are going to want to see. The problem that happened, particularly in Nataki's tenure, is that the amount of plays that they were able to offer was reduced. So there's fewer plays. So instead of a 10-play season, you have a 5-play season. So if people don't like 3 of those 5 plays, it's a lot different. It's a lot different vibe than if they're not liking 3 of 10 plays.
Also, I imagine there's been a cultural shift in I think many of our awareness in terms of what we like to see on stage, which includes diversity. I would notice if it's an all white cast, is kind of a, if so I don't know that you mentioned in the article, and I linked to it here in the chat, and we'll send you all an email, that yes, there is a painful racial history in Ashland. There have been specific events. Taki's tenure was mired by the difficulties she faced as a Black woman in a leadership position, which is just kind of undeniable that she will face those. The land acknowledgement, I think you mentioned, some people found annoying at the beginning, but there's also just in the 89 years of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a shift in just all of our cultural awareness, what we expect, what we desire to experience when we go to an artistic event or any sort of event. So I think that the wokeness isn't necessarily wokeness, it's just the shift in the way that we do things to try and be more inclusive.
Yeah, I agree completely. And also, as I said, yeah, the idea that people are resistant to change. The founder, Angus Baumer, once at a certain point, they were only doing plays in an outdoor theater, said, I think, we could build an indoor theater and we could do more plays. And people were like, don't do that. You'll ruin the festival. Nobody's going to come. But he did it. And the festival was not ruined and people still came. Another artistic director, guy named Jerry Turner, said, I think we could probably do some Ibsen here. People are like, oh no, don't do that. You'll ruin the festival. People can see Ibsen anywhere. They come, but he started doing Ibsen and they started doing modern plays. But there's always this idea of, oh, don't change it. You'll ruin it. You'll ruin what people love about it. And it's never true. They never, what people love about the festival never gets ruined.
Jim asks, we've got some folks here who I seem to know some inside baseball here. In late 2022 and early 23, ahead of Garrett's departure, there were some rather surprising major departures from the administrative offices at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Do you know anything about why people like the executive director and director of development left?
Well, I think, and I'm not sure which executive director you're talking about. Paul Nicholson, who was there for a long, long time, he had just reached retirement age. He had just reached, retirement age. I think he had spent a certain amount of time at the festival and was ready to leave it to someone else. And I can't remember the woman's name who came in after him, but I think I'm just guessing, but I think she felt like because the managing director, artistic director need to work really closely, for whatever reason, when Bill Rausch left and Nataki came on, I think she felt like, and she'd probably been there, I think 5 or 6 years, and which is not a long time compared to Paul Nicholson's tenure before, but I think she just felt like there should be a new managing director to go with this new artistic director, because they do need. Nataki hadn't picked her, not that the artistic director picked the managing director, but there can be a number of reasons for people leaving, and so I don't know for sure why those people left. And the timing of it may make it seem a little bit suspicious, but I don't know for sure.
I want to get to one comment and then we'll end with a question, if that's cool. I just want to acknowledge Marianne's comment, who is a longtime attendee, gone to Oregon Shakespeare Festival since the year 2000, was less disturbed by the choice of plays cast and was saddened particularly by the lack of support from the box office to online offerings during the pandemic, which is just kind of an interesting observation, I think.
Yeah.
That's how Alta Live was started, by the way. She lives in LA and found most performing arts organizations worked really hard to get content to us in our houses. And so she felt the lack of support had come from the top down, looking forward to the new artistic director. So an interesting kind of perspective. And finally, Marcus, a question for you. I think this is a great one to end on. Susan asks, I'm curious as to whether Marcus has any ideas regarding how to stimulate audiences to return to Ashland. Putting artistic struggles aside, Ashland is a difficult place to get to. The summer air can be smoke-filled and younger audiences are not inherently attracted to Shakespeare. How can OSF change to adapt to the myriad of obstacles they face? In your expertise, what would you do? What do you think they should do?
Well, I think what they're trying to do, I think they need to program some plays which are going to be more accessible to younger people, and such as they brought in Rent last year, and I think there is that, which is bringing in plays that are more accessible does not mean dumbing down the content or doing something which would seem silly. I think it's just taking time to find that which a younger person could get access to. But I saw, and I saw younger people really enjoying Romeo and Juliet. I saw a crowd this spring just thrilled with the Macbeth that was taking place, which was very traditionally done, yet also had a number of modern elements to it. So I think you have to let people know who are not as aware that coming to see this work and to see these plays is not taking medicine. It's not, isn't, you don't have to hold your nose. You're not going to get lectured to. You're going to be entertained, but you have to be open to it. And so, and not to just pump Nataki's flag, but what she wanted to do, and I don't think she ever quite was able to get there, was to try to not only program but market to a new, different audience who didn't think that this was for them, and say, yes, it is. We want to make this for you, and it's a process. It's a process. Going back to talking about these changes across the board in different. I was reading an interview with the new artistic directors of the Mark Taper Forum, and he was saying, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for people to get where I'm coming from, understand my program, understand what I'm doing here. And, Nataki didn't get that. In a way, Tim Bond has it built in because he was there for 14 years before. So he has kind of that, he has that grace period he's kind of through that. And he, he knows what's going on. He knows what's going on there. So he will, and I think he will build on what Nataki was trying to do, but it's just making people understand that there are things there for them, and that's an educational thing. It's educating prospective audiences that there are things here for you that you will enjoy. Yes, it is different from what you're used to, but not that much.
On that note, Marcus Crowder, you are a delight. Everyone at Alta loves working with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today at Alta Live, to continue to write for us. It has been eye-opening and always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Beth, thank you so much. I love your support. I appreciate it so much, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Folks, join us next week. We're going to welcome author Tracy McMillan. She will be in conversation with senior editor Matt Haber, but I'll still be here to welcome you and chat with you in the chat. So join us for that. That's a week from today. What's that? May 15th at 12:30. And join us for Gary Snyder next week on Thursday at 5 p.m. Marcus and everyone else, take care.
Thank you.
Be safe. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.